Yes, I'm Loretta Beniti. You often hear from state lawmakers about the issues facing North Carolina here on In Focus. But those lawmakers don't often get to talk much about themselves. That's why we are continuing our series highlighting both Republican and Democratic legislators to give you a look behind the curtain at what drives them to want to shape North Carolina's future. This week, we're putting the spotlight on House Majority Leader John Bell.
Aye. All those voting no. Ayes have it. 4 seats favor, 1. Thank you.
John Bell was born in Wilson, North Carolina, but his family would soon move to Wayne County.
And when I was thinking I was 2 or 3, we moved to Mount Olive, and so that's what I call home. Mount Olive is where I grew up, is where my family's from, and so that's where it all started.
He played sports in high school, football and baseball, and enjoyed hunting and fishing. He was also a Boy Scout, something that helped guide him to be of service to his community.
It was just expected. It was just what we did. My dad was active in the community. My mom was active in the community. My grandmother and my grandfather were extremely active in the community. My grandmother was director of Goshen Medical Center, and so she helped launch rural health care in eastern North Carolina. And so, but it was a church, family, community organizations, events going on. We were always a part of that growing up. It's just what we did.
Looking back, he says politics wasn't something he saw himself going into, but he does remember the first time he got a taste of it.
On Sundays, everybody went to a little restaurant called Southern Belle in Mount Olive after church. And I remember a gentleman there would always be in his seersucker suit, white buck shoes. I thought was really cool. And that was Senator Lewis Pate. It was Mayor Lewis Pate at the time, but it became Senator Lewis Pate. And so I knew a lot of the figures, but really didn't process it.
He says it was expected that he would go to college after high school, and he did, and then went to work. And it was that job at a bank where his boss and a county commissioner actually nudged him into politics.
He said, look, Lewis Pate is going to run for the state Senate, and I'm going to run for the state House. And I said, okay. And he said, Claudia and I were talking, that was my boss, and said, you would do a good job running his campaign. And I said, I've never ran a campaign. He said, well, I've never ran for the House. I said, well, okay, let me think about it. And so I went home and talked to my mom and dad about it and just said, hey, what do you think? And because I always bounce ideas off them. And they said, look, Mr. Efton's a great man, and we have a lot of respect for him and his family. And look, it could be a great learning opportunity for you. So I volunteered my time and I ran his campaign out.
They won, and he started his involvement in the Republican Party after that, and soon was recruited to run himself. He was a newlywed and would be running against a longtime incumbent, but he did, and won, just barely.
But that's what I won by, 39 votes. Election night, well, I think it was like 54, 55, through canvases, recounts, residency challenges, I went through it all. I came out ahead and was victorious by about 39 votes. And so I remind people that every vote counts, every vote matters. And so I won that Republican primary, went on to the general election, and then I won there and walked into the General Assembly September 9th, 2013. Hey,
Hi, it's nice to meet
John
you.
Bell, it's good to see you. Come on in.
From there, Bell's rise was quick, becoming the Majority Whip in 2014 and then Majority Leader in 2016, a position that he says he looks at as a way to help his colleagues help their communities.
I mean, they froze. That's actually what I was doing right before I walked in here. I've got a group of legislators meeting in our conference room right now, and we're navigating through a bill, and that's part of my job. So, you know, as the Majority Leader, I get elected by the Republican caucus, and it's my job to get the Republican caucus agenda through the House and into the Senate and negotiate at the end of the day. I work hand in hand with the Speaker to make sure that gets done. Come on in. Come on in. All right, so what's on your mind?
He says it's also part of his job to help his Democratic colleagues work through the system and get their bills heard too.
Do you have the bill?
He says that's because he knows how hard it is to navigate the halls of the legislature. And he remembers what he calls one of his most consequential bills that he also carried as his very first bill.
And then I was up here, we had a major issue that happened. At the time this was playing out is that we had a wind turbine facility that was going to be located up in what we call the Dare County bombing range. And if that wind turbine facility would have been built, it would have closed a low-level training route for the jets at Seymour Johnson. At the time, it's grown since then. That was about a $600+ million economic impact in my area, thousands of families and employees. And Seymour Johnson would have been at risk of closing. Because the military looks at that as, hey, you know, if we can't do the mission here, we're going to relocate these jets to a place that we can do the mission.
Today, he counts his work on flood mitigation and hurricane reparations as his top concerns.
That's also personal. You know, I've walked in the floodwaters. I've seen the damage that it's had in eastern North Carolina in my hometown.
Was this a technical amendment that we've been working with stakeholders on, and asked for your favorable report? Thank you.
He says he tries to remember not to take his position of leadership and as a spokesman for his community for granted, and remind himself every day of his responsibility.
And every day when I walk in that chamber, I always take a minute to look around, and probably sometimes you'll see me staring at the ceiling, but I always look at the ceiling and say, man, in a state of 11, 12 million people and growing, I get to be one of the 120 that sit in this chamber and make decisions that affect everyday North Carolinians.
This Week in Focus is putting the spotlight on State House Majority Leader Representative John Bell, and Representative Bell is with us right now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, you know, you talk like so many lawmakers that I talk to that it wasn't necessarily something you saw yourself getting into, being an elected official. What was it, do you think, that triggered you to say, I can do this?
So, you know, I always grew up being active in the community. And I was doing the business development for a credit union, so being active in the community was something we did. And I got involved politically, helping folks run for office, and then got involved in party politics. And then, frankly, I just got asked, hey, would you consider this? And I was like, absolutely not. Why would I do that? I've just got married. I've got a great job. Why would I put that on hold? And then it got to be more than that. It's, you know, hey, this is an opportunity to serve your community, to serve your area, to represent Eastern North Carolina. And if you win, good things will happen. And if you've come short, you got a chance to meet a lot of people across the state, and good things will happen there too.
You know, listen, everybody knows being a legislator, it's not easy. It's long hours, it's a lot of work. People are critical of everything that you're doing.
Yes, they are.
But do you enjoy doing this?
I do. You know, people ask me, they say, what's the best part about the job? And I say, the people. Then they ask me, what's the most challenging part about the job? And I said, the people. But, you know, it's not only the people I work with, but it's the people that I represent. When you're on the way up here today, I was having a conversation about a lady that's, her and her mother are about to move back into their house after being, frankly, flooded out in 2016. And so it's hearing her concerns, but also the joy is that, hey, we're almost to the end. It's getting it's getting to help that person that didn't know where else to turn, getting the support and the help they need. It's answering the questions from constituents. Those things make a difference. It's seeing those water and sewer projects that no one ever thinks about until it becomes a problem. It's driving past the Maxwell Center in Goldsboro and saying, you know, hey, if we hadn't come together, we never would have this wonderful facility today. These are the type of projects. Watching those jets fly at Seymour Johnson and saying, man, 10 years ago, if I would have failed, there's a possibility those jets wouldn't be flying today. That's the impact that it has. That's what keeps me driving.
Well, we want to talk to you about some of those issues that are important to you. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we have much more with Representative John Bell. Welcome back. This Week in Focus is putting the spotlight on State House Majority Leader John Bell. Representative Bell, thank you so much for staying with us. Let's talk about some of these big issues that you're working on. And I think anybody who spends any time at the legislature now knows that disaster relief is something that you certainly seem to be passionate about. We obviously saw some pretty big hurricanes go through North Carolina in the last several years, and it really has affected people.
It absolutely has, and you know, it's one thing to be passionate about it, but I'm passionate about it because I lived it. Not only did I live it personally, but I got to see my friends and family navigate through it. You know, I was down in Wallace helping my aunt and my uncle move stuff into and out of their house after being flooded. I had neighbors that lost homes, vehicles, and were asked to leave, and they couldn't come back. And it's not that they couldn't come back for a week or so; they couldn't come back for years. And so it's reshaped our community. There's parts of my community now that were once thriving neighborhoods that are now no longer there. There's businesses that are sitting vacant that have been flooding. We had companies leave because their facilities were flooded. And so it's personal. It affects everyone in my area. And so that's why it's a big passion of mine.
You talk about people having to be out of their homes for years. I think there's some people,
Still
right?
today.
There's some people who don't realize this. That
Absolutely.
we can go back to Hurricane Matthew, which seems like a long time ago to some of us, and there's still people who haven't been able to get back into their homes yet.
And so, you know, I go back to Hurricane Matthew. I remember walking down the road there at Cherry Hospital after looking at the flooding, because they had to evacuate the prison and some of the facilities there. And we were standing, I was there with Congressman Rouser, guy at the time, Governor Pat McCrory, and his team. We were talking about what we're going to do and how we're going to navigate through this. And then meeting with property owners, business owners, homeowners, and they're honestly taking stuff out of their house. Yeah. And not knowing when they're going to come back. And at that moment, I said, you know, there's got to be a better way. We have to do something different. And then I remember sitting in the back of a deuce and a half driving through the flow waters saying, what can I do? And just a response from people were, don't let us be forgotten. Don't let them forget us. In a day or two, the cameras are going to leave. All the news crews will leave, and we'll be left cleaning up. Don't let them forget us. And so that's been my mission. They're not going to be forgotten. And you know, my goal is to make sure that everyone gets back in their house. And that's what drives a lot of policy we do, not just on the disaster relief side, but also how can we mitigate these damages moving forward? How can we put a plan in place that works for our state, but not just for Eastern North Carolina, but all of North Carolina? Because I've been to the mountains. I've stood there with Representative Pless and Gillespie and Representative Clampett and Representative Balcom and seen the damage that's come from you know, a normal day in Western North Carolina. Everything is great. Massive rains come in, and it's not like in the east where it floods over miles. When it floods there, it comes straight down the mountain, and it comes in a hurry. And it goes from a pleasant day to a disastrous day, and next thing you know, you have a trench where there's nothing left. And so the flooding's different there, but we can mitigate some of that damage too. So walking their hometowns, their areas with them, learning what can be done is a mission that not just myself, but many others have, that we're going to try to do our best to mitigate the damage that can happen moving forward.
I also wanted to talk to you about supporting the military. You've talked about the fact Seymour Johnson is right there in your district.
We call it the fourth but first. It's the fourth fighter wing, but first in our hearts and minds, and we're very proud to have them based in Goldsboro.
For you as a legislator, how important is the military community and helping the military community?
So when you look at North Carolina overall, it's our second largest economic impact. Agriculture being number one, our military being number two. I believe it's somewhere around 80, 85 counties have some type of military operations going on in our state. So it's a huge footprint. And not just on the active duty side, but then you think about the veterans that retire and choose to stay in our state. So you've seen, even in the beginning of my legislative career, working with Senator Lewis Page, Senator Harry Brown, on the Senate side, working with my colleagues, former Representative Craig Horn, now Mayor Craig Horn, veteran. All of these folks were really active in trying to make North Carolina the most military-friendly state in the country. And we continue that mission today. You're constantly seeing bills doing that. Representative George Cleveland has helped lead the charge on that. Representative Phil Shepard from also from the Onslow County area helped lead the charge on that. Now you got Representative Steve Tyson, new representative from Craven County, leading the charge on that. And so it's a huge part of our state's history, but it's also a major footprint in our state to protect those installations, make sure they're growing. And then when those people decide to retire from their careers, we want them to stay here in North Carolina and raise a family.
So often when we think about the military, we think at the federal level, but what is happening at the state level, things with taxes, making sure folks can get the jobs, all of that, that's an important part of helping.
Absolutely. You look at the licensure requirements come in. As a matter of fact, myself, Senator Buck Newton, Representative Jimmy Dixon, our Wayne County delegation, sat down with our school board and our base commander and his leadership team to say, okay, how can we navigate through these licensures to get more base personnel when they're moving into the area, get them ready for, expedite the teacher licensure, these type of issues that we're seeing now, so these people can come into our community and immediately go to work and be a part of our community. And so that's a part of it. You also have to look at the tax codes, what we've been working on for the last 11 years on restructuring our tax code, making it friendly. You saw a move by Representative John Zoka to exempt military retirement. And these are all very attractive measures that we've done to keep these folks here. And it's paid dividends.
Okay, we have more to talk to you about. We're going to take one more commercial break. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. This week, In Focus is putting the spotlight on State House Majority Leader John Bell. Representative Bell is with us. We're talking about some of the issues that you personally look at pretty closely. And, you know, since I've moved to North Carolina, this urban-rural divide, how that plays out is something that we talk about a lot in this state. Why is it so important that the legislature pays attention to that?
So, you know, you see a lot of states where you have your economic development centers, like, for example, Georgia. Everybody talks about Atlanta. Nobody really talks about the other part of the state. And so that becomes a focus in national elections, et cetera. It's also their population driver. In North Carolina, we want to make sure that we have a happy balance. And so far, we've done a really good job of that. And so, you know, we want our urban areas to thrive and survive. We want to see Raleigh thrive. We want to see Charlotte thrive. But also, we want to see little places like Fremont and Mount Olive and you know, down in Calypso and Dudley and the places around my area. We want to see them thrive too. And so you see a happy mix of the policies and the balance that we have growth throughout the state. And so when you look at a lot of the tax policies, the incentive packages that our state offers, it really does a good job of balancing both. And we've had some major job announcements over the last couple of years that not only have come into our state, but help our rural areas start to thrive.
It's interesting to look at the legislature. So much of the leadership at the legislature is from the smaller communities. It's not the big cities that we see for the leadership at the legislature. Does that help? Well,
it does, because, you know, we also focus on our areas, but also, you know, this session, the 2023-2024 session, became the first time in our state's history where the majority of representation in our state comes from urban North Carolina, not rural North Carolina. You know, for many years, we're considered a rural state. Now we've had that shift in leadership. So, you know, my area has a lot more in common and maybe out in Carl Gillespie's district in Western North Carolina than what I have with some of my friends in downtown Raleigh. And but we understand the balance of both. And working with the mayor of Raleigh and the city council, saying, hey, look, you know, we want you to grow, but every time you put houses up, that water drains down my area. So we have to have responsible growth. We understand that you have congestion issues, but we have connection issues. And so it's finding that balance and striking that balance. And I think we've done a really good job with it, but there's still more to be done.
So we talked about the fact you are the majority leader. You rose in the ranks in the legislature very quickly.
I don't think anybody else wanted to do it. So they said, here you go.
So as the majority leader, how do you look at that role? What do you see your role as?
So I often joke with my colleagues, I'm the only one in the building that doesn't get an opinion, because my opinion is what the caucus's opinion. And, you know, I joke about that, but also there's some truth to that. My job is to make sure that the Republican caucus agenda is acted on and executed. And so it also involves helping members. You have new members that come in that don't understand the process. How can you help get them there? You have other members that have been there for a while but maybe want you on a bill to add that extra input and emphasis. And so I spend a lot of time helping not just my colleagues in the Republican caucus, but also working with my friend, the Democrat leader, Robert Reeves, and helping members in his caucus. You know, I'm one vote out of 120. Last time I checked, you got to get a majority plus one. And sometimes not all your colleagues will vote with you. So you have to work those angles. You have to work that process. And I value relationships. I try to do a really good job of making relationships. I don't like to cultivate enemies. I like to find ways to make things happen. I like to find solutions and not be an obstacle.
I mean, a lot of people look at the legislature from a distance and say, oh, Republicans and Democrats don't work together at all for what we see. Perhaps that's the news media's the way that we're portrayed.
Well, that's what makes good story headlines. You know, it'd be really boring if you came on TV and said, everything went great today in Raleigh.
But do you find yourself talking to the Democrats, not just Representative Reeves, but the other Democrats frequently?
Because it's about building relationships, and you know, it's no secret Representative Reeves and I have a great relationship. But also, I'm going to an event this afternoon where I'm going to see one of my former colleagues, now Congressman Don Davis, Senator Davis, well, Congressman Davis when he was Senator Davis, and I covered a lot of the same territory. We worked hand in hand together, and so you have to build those relationships in order to be effective. I value those relationships. You can't do this on your own. And the moment you walk in and alienate people or alienate regions, you're going to lose. And so in the business I'm in the business we're in Raleigh, is when I lose, it's not just me losing. 90+ thousand people in my district just lost. And so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they're successful, make sure I represent them well, and make sure that we're constantly winning, not losing.
So talk to me, so running for office wasn't something that you thought you were going to do. Now you're in leadership, and have been in leadership for a while in the House. What's next? What do you still want to accomplish?
Well, there's opportunities. It's no secret around the building. If Speaker Moore decides to retire, I'd love to take a shot at Speaker. I've been encouraged by a number of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do that. But I really feel like that what I bring to the table, the value I bring, is in state politics. I'm very happy in the House of Representatives. I don't see a move running for statewide office. A lot of people say, don't you want to run for Congress? I was like, no, I get more done in 15 minutes than they'll do in DC in years. So why would I want to do that? But I feel like the value I bring to the table is in state government. But I also think there's a time. And, I want to be effective. I want to serve my community, serve my state, work with my colleagues. But eventually it'll be time to retire and go home and spend time with my family. I've got a 8.5-year-old daughter. I never knew how big that half was. But I want to watch her grow up and be there as dad. And so that's the beautiful thing about a citizen legislators that we have here in the state, is that there's a time. You come in, you serve, you represent your community, you help make effective change, and then you go back to work and let somebody else that have maybe better ideas or more energy come in and do that. So
Representative
that's
Belding.
my plan.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining our conversation as we focus in on the big issues facing North Carolina. Next week, we're putting the spotlight on Democratic State Representative Ashton Clemens. We'll see you then, and until then, have a great week.